actions, pastimes, etc. To start off, Vanchakalpa, Trubhischa, Kripasindubhyevacha, Patitanam Pavanebhya, Vaishnavebhya, Namo Namaha. Jai, Nathakuri Vaishnava Vrinda ki Jai. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Kalkanta Prabhu, we're going to actually be recording this for posterity as well. And since this is going to be archived, I'd like to introduce you before you start speaking, so that in the future also, when people watch these recordings, they know about you. So in 1972, His Grace Kalkanta Prabhu joined the ISKCON temple in Portland, Oregon, USA. In 1973, Srila Prabhupada accepted him as a first and second initiated disciple. For the next 4 years, he distributed Srila Prabhupada's books to academic libraries throughout North America and Europe. After Srila Prabhupada's departure, Kalkanta Prabhu served as a Bhakta leader, temple president, teacher, and temple consultant. In 2008, he established the Bhakti Academy, a Bhakti immersion ashram that has to date attracted over 350 students. In turn, these devotees already distributed over 1 million of Srila Prabhupada's books in North America. Today, Kalkanta Prabhu and his family maintain a small farm near the ISKCON Alachua temple, from which he lectures, counsels, and helps other temples to establish Bhakti Academy programs. He is the author of several books, including Endangered Species, a practical manual on devotee recruiting and training. His current writing project is the first English translation of the Gita Gan, Srila Prabhupada's Bengali rendition of the Bhagavad Gita. Srila Prabhupada, quote, Srila Prabhupada has blessed my life with Krishna consciousness, close quote, Kalkanta Prabhu says, and continuing quotes, and I do my best to share his divine graces, blessings with others, close quotes. Please, Prabhu, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. Wonderful to be here with you, Nityananda Prabhu, and all of the assembled devotees. I can see my friend Yogi there in Houston. Yeah, Haribo. Vanchakalpatarubhischa kripasindubhyevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Yes, the year I joined was the same year Tamal Krishna Maharaj had taken sannyas, and the initiation ceremony for me in 1973 was conducted by Vishnu Goswami, his partner in crime in Radha Damodar. So I met Vishnu Goswami, but never met Tamal Krishna Goswami. And he was quite a towering figure just by reputation. So, in fact, I was kind of glad I didn't have to meet him. I was a little frightened of him. So I first met him in 1975 in Miami, when he and Vishnu Goswami were there distributing books with the Radha Damodar party. And they were sort of clandestinely recruiting people from other parties to join the Radha Damodar party. So I had received an invitation to visit them on the Radha Damodar bus. And I got on the bus, and there they were, the divine couple, Tamal Krishna Maharaj and Vishnu Goswami. And they were kind of looking at me and asking some questions. And I was feeling like, okay, I think I'll stay with the library party. I had nothing but respect for them, for Tamal Krishna Maharaj, except this very strong figure that he cut was a little bit diametrically opposed to my more introverted nature. So a few years later, after Srila Prabhupada's departure, he invited me to come to Houston to be the temple president there. Things were quite chaotic in those days. And there had been a lot of confusion about how the disciplic succession would be continued. So he had, on the one hand, been a prominent member of the small group of devotees who were giving Diksha. But on the other hand, he had been very candid about how Prabhupada never gave him that instruction, other than in the general way he'd given it to everybody. So I appreciated that. He gave this talk, you probably know, at the Pyramid House in California, that was quite instrumental in bringing about reformations to improve ISKCON in this area. And his candor was extremely inspiring to me and many others who were concerned about the situation. So the other thing that, well, in any case, by the time I really started working with him closely, it was 1984. He had been through so many things. He'd been through the incredible historic opening of ISKCON in China. He had inherited the Midwest zone and started developing the Dallas Temple and Houston Temple, as well as others, Chicago, St. Louis. And he was quite introspective. I found him more introspective than I had expected when I actually got to know him and work with him. It was still sort of the era of very prominent gurus, and he was certainly amongst them. But he was also shifting his mood from what had been a very strong advocacy of renunciation to supporting the householders who are now his disciples and staffing his temples in Texas, particularly. So this was quite a transition. He had also begun to display his scholarly side through the publication of the Jagannath Priya Natakam that he was working on and I believe published around that time. So I was surprised to see this aspect of him. I had seen him as sort of a Kshatriya-like figure, a commander, a general on the battlefield, organizing troops, fighting Maya. And I began to see this artistic side. The design of the temple in Dallas, for example, was quite directly inspired by him. And it was quite amazing and beautiful and just incredibly well executed temple experience there. It was the pride of ISKCON America in those days, as well as the palace in New Vrindavan. But Maharaj had this artistic side, this creative side, as well as the softer side, along with his commanding strategic presence as an ISKCON leader. And this is when I really got to know him better. We worked together and in developing the Houston Temple. So at that time, the Houston Temple was a very decrepit building in downtown Houston. There had been some unsuccessful attempts to renovate it. And so like a quarter of the building was basically unsafe to step in. And in the mornings, the pujaris were instructed to turn on the lights in the altar and then take a broom in hand because there would be rats on the altar. And they had to scare away the rats before they could wake the deities. It was a tough place. So we all knew it was time for a new temple. My responsibility was to find different prospects for the new location. So I found three. One was a former yoga compound near Rice University. One was a former nightclub on Westheimer Boulevard, and one was a former Baptist church in Northwest Houston. So we went and looked at all three, actually. Tamal, Krishna Maharaj, Gunagrahi Maharaj, and myself. We were the committee. So we saw all three. Gunagrahi Maharaj liked the nightclub on Westheimer because that was sort of his MO for reaching out. He liked to reach young people in the public. I liked the yoga compound near Rice because the college environment always appealed to me. But Maharaj said, no, we're going to need a place. There are so many Indian immigrants here in Houston, and they need facilities, and they'll be a great ally for us. So we should get this church. So that was the decision. We got that Baptist church and began renovating and working from there. So at that time, he also brought the construction crew from Dallas. They did some basic upgrades, and then he arranged to have the beautiful and large deities shipped from Mayapur. Now, these deities were just an inch or two shorter, I believe, than Radhamadava, the presiding deities of ISKCON there in Mayapur, but very large, the largest in North America. I think his vision was Texas, and Texas things are bigger, so we're going to have the biggest deities. In any case, they came. It took us a year to get the temple room ready. And finally, on Janmashtami of 1986, the deities were installed. It was quite an occasion. We had a big abhishek. We actually bathed the deities themselves by hoisting a bucket and a contraption overhead and being able to pull the rope and dump buckets of milk and yogurt and honey on the deities. It was just fantastic. So I very much enjoyed working with Maharaj during that time, and got to know him better, and also began to see a side of him emerging from the all-in sannyasi kind of mood that he had used to serve Srila Prabhupada so long and well in developing this movement. I always felt if anyone was Prabhupada's right-hand man, it was Tamal Krishna Maharaj. So after that, we parted ways for some years, and I would see him in Mayapur from time to time for the annual GBC meetings and festivals. Always very gracious, always very kind. And then in 2001, he was conducting the meetings in Mayapur, or attending the meetings in Mayapur. Correct me, I'm forgetting if it's 2001, 2002, his last year with us. In any case, I remember vividly, he had been away from the GBC, and I'd been serving as the secretary several years before. So he had not been at the meetings because he was pursuing his academic career at Southern Methodist and then Cambridge. So this was the first year he was coming back, and the scene was quite interesting. The GBC meetings could be full of a lot of testosterone and intensity, and some of the leaders, like Anuttama Prabhu, were trying to bring a softer and more collegiate environment. And so at the meetings that year, he began with an exercise where all of the GBC members were to go around the rooms and offer respects to one another and tell each other why they appreciated them. It was sort of a new age, feel good type of experience, something that was quite new to the GBC. So just at that moment, when everyone is going through this exercise around the room, all these crusty sannyasis, in comes Tamal Krishna Maharaj. I think everybody all of a sudden felt, uh-oh, should we be doing this right now? But Maharaj, he just jumped right in and he participated once he understood. So it was just great having him back in the leadership role of ISKCON, from which he had been on leave during these years when he was finishing his degrees. And that year, I was working with the Mayapur project, and he was asking various God brothers, what do you think I should do after I complete my graduate work? So he was getting different proposals here and there, but the one he was most interested in was working with us in developing the Mayapur project. Abhiram Prabhu is a dear friend of Tamal Krishna Maharaj. He and I were working on that at the time, and we were quite excited about the prospect of being able to work with Tamal Krishna Maharaj in that connection. So he was thinking about developing a university. He had various visions, and we were all just so excited at the prospect of working with him. So the last time I saw him, he was hosting kirtans in his room. His room in Mayapur was about, maybe 1,200 square feet, pretty good sized open room. And in the evenings, he would have devotees come for kirtan in his room. Simple thing, but it became a very popular place. And Abhiram was telling me, you should come for this kirtan. So I came, and when I got there, the room was absolutely packed. There were people coming out the doors, and the kirtan was very sweet. So I was there, peering in the window, relishing the kirtan, and all of a sudden Maharaj spotted me, and he pointed at me in his commanding way, and he, come here. So I was perfectly fine just staying on the periphery, but he wanted all the God brothers to be sitting in the middle of the room. And so I made my way through, and Keshav Bharati Maharaj moved this way, and Jayadvaita Maharaj moved this way. We were all very squished together, but right there in the center of the room. And Niranjan Maharaj was leading the kirtan. And so it was very sweet. Then he finished, and then Tamal Krishna Maharaj said, chant that Krishna, Krishna, Krishna melody. Chant that Krishna, Krishna, Krishna melody. That was a new melody at the time. It's the one that goes, Hare Krishna, 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 Hare Hare. So Niranjan Maharaj began singing that, and we were just floating in the waves. It was so ecstatic and memorable, those kirtans. I think we chanted for at least a couple of hours. Then when it was over, he asked everyone to leave. He invited the God brothers to stay, gave us some prasadam. So gracious, so very soft and gentle, and encouraging. All the things that I used to think about him had just vanished into this person, in the presence of this most caring, loving, and accommodating personality that he had manifested. So I left Mayapur that day, the next day, and he was scheduled to leave the day after. So I had arrived in London and staying at the manor, and in the morning at Mangalarti, his disciple Gauridas announced his departure. I was there. I mean, I was actively engaged in service when Srila Prabhupada departed. We knew it was a likelihood. Most of us had not gotten to know Prabhupada personally, except through his books and his service. So at least for me, my understanding of Prabhupada was not as personal, and therefore his departure did not have the impact on me, nearly the impact on me that Tamal Krishna Maharaj's departure had. I was shaken, and I was deeply affected for weeks, for months. Nothing compared to his disciples, of course, and other God brothers who were closer. But still, he was to me like a star in the ISKCON firmament. It was something you would always expect would be there. He was someone you would expect always to be there. ISKCON was just not complete without Tamal Krishna Maharaj. So I enjoy being with his disciples and close God brothers on occasions like this, to share these memories and to think of him. I have considered him a role model in my life and my service. I think of him often, trying to do things in a strategic way, as I believe he would do in these reclining years of my life. So thank you for inviting me today and allowing me to meditate on Maharaj and share this time with you. I wish you all wonderful success in his service and carrying on his legacy in devotional service. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so very much, Kalakanta Prabhu. It's really wonderful to hear from you and hear about everything you said. We have devotees who would like to ask some questions. So, do you mind fielding some questions?
No, not at all.
Okay, all right. So I'm going to open up the floor. So if any one of you would like to ask something, please, this is an opportunity. Seems like Shraddhanjali Mataji, are you trying to say something? Are you saying Haribol? Maybe like to say, ask
Yes.
something, say something.
Hare Krishna. Our humble obeisances to
Hi.
everyone. Kalachandji is here too, and we love the talk. Thank you so much. It's just, and especially on Easter Sunday, it's wonderful to hear. Thank you very much.
So good to hear from you, Haribol, my dear friends. I see Nritya Kishore is asking if I have any specific memorable exchanges. A few random ones, if you like. I remember when Maharaj he was known as the gourmet guru. I had never seen anyone in my life as particular about what they were going to eat as Tamal Krishna Maharaj. When he was staying in Dallas, every morning he would ask who was going to cook, and then he would call them in his room, and then he would discuss a menu with them. And then the godbrothers he would invite would come up and join him upstairs in his quarters for lunch. So he always had these incredibly delicious meals served. And when people would bring around seconds, he had this phrase, he would say, "I'll have a little less of that." Ordinarily, he would say, "I'll have a little more of that." In sort of this sannyas mood, he would say, "I'll have a little less of that." I also remember when he was writing the Jagannath Priya Natakam, that inspired me because I had some desire to write, but didn't really know how to start. So he was kind enough to work with me and talk with me about some embryonic writing projects I had. I remember he was very encouraging. And since his departure, actually just after that is when I started writing seriously. So I also appreciate that. One other thing, just random things coming to mind. He had some sort of propensity to sneeze one time every morning. Anyone else ever experienced that? He would talk about it. Every morning he would sneeze once. And it was, okay, there's my sneeze for the day. So anyway, those are some random things that come to mind.
Yeah, thank you.
Yogi has his hand up.
Yes, Yogi Prabhu, please unmute yourself.
Haribol.
Haribol Prabhu, thank you for the memories of Tamal Krishna. I don't know too much about him, and this was lovely. When you were telling the story of you guys picking the places, you said that he said we want to basically, I'll use my language. You said something else, but leverage the Indian community here. Was there any conversation of why that Baptist church was? Did he know, like, okay, well, the Indian community will come here? Like, what made him pick that?
Yes, it was because it was a public place of worship, a place where people would customarily come on Sundays. And he wanted to provide that facility for the Indian community in Houston. He just felt that would be a good forward-looking approach to spreading Krishna consciousness in that area. And so that's exactly what happened. People started coming. At that time, you have to understand that we had maybe 2 or 3 families who were seriously engaged in the temple activities in Houston. Dwarkanath Prabhu was the mainstay. He was the original, actually. I think he's still doing shopping for the temple after all these years, nearly 40 years. But his vision was to shift from the ashram-based, brahmachari-based, book distribution-based model in temples to a broader congregational base that would serve householders and children and families from all different ethnicities and nationalities. He also had the concept of a restaurant being there to complement the worship in the temple. And the property in Houston was much more conducive for these things. The church was much more conducive. The others were oriented more for young students. And he thought we had passed that phase, and he was absolutely right in his vision. In fact, the devotees there have taken it, I think, far beyond anything any of us imagined possible at that time. And for me, that's why recently I've had the opportunity to go back to Houston and work with the wonderful leaders there to develop a Krishna House model. That Krishna House project is flourishing. It's attracting people, and I always felt great satisfaction in offering this little service for Tamal Krishna Maharaj. I think he would see strategically that we've gone from one swing of the pendulum to the other, and now we should find a place in the middle that will accommodate a broader spectrum of people coming to Krishna consciousness. So Yogi, if you don't know Yogi, he's one of the students there at Krishna House Houston.
Nice.
Okay, let's see. Here's a question from Dina Bandhu. I recall some Houston pastime where Maharaj was being worshipped by the devotees, and he directed worship towards Srila Prabhupada rather than accepting it directly. Do you recall? I'm not recalling any specific incident. Can you share any more details? I'm not resonating with that particular. That was his general mood, I can say that, certainly. But no, I'm not remembering. Perhaps others have some recollection about Maharaj making statements in that regard, directing worship away from himself into Srila Prabhupada. No? Okay.
This I think is something I can say about that. I think it may reference the time. It may reference a time when there was this shift away from the zonal acharya system, and we were very accustomed to having two altars at our temples. And one altar would have Srila Prabhupada on it, Vyasasan, sorry. One Vyasasan would have Srila Prabhupada, the other Vyasasan would have whoever the zonal acharya was for that zone. And in our zone in Fiji, we had Tamal Krishna Maharaj. And we were accustomed to doing two Guru Pujas in the morning. Srila Prabhupada's Guru Puja, and then we'd do Tamal Krishna Maharaj's Guru Puja. And so then, of course, the GBC came out with the ruling that the zonal acharya puja had to stop. It was only Srila Prabhupada's. But some of the disciples wanted to continue because of habit or love or whatever we may describe it as. At that time, he spoke to us all quite strongly and said why he supported the idea that only Srila Prabhupada should be worshipped, and that he didn't mind if somebody wanted to worship him in the privacy of their own home. They were quite entitled to do that, but not in public. So I remember that there was one aspect that had to do with that part. But I don't know if that's what Mother Chitra and Dina Bandhu were referring to, but that certainly did happen at one time.
Yes, he was a visionary in this regard also, seeing that the direction that we had taken was off. Our concept of guru was only Srila Prabhupada, so becoming a guru meant, well, I should do what Srila Prabhupada did, but it was quite divisive and unsuccessful, and he could see that.
Yes.
So, yeah, he was early on one to realize that, yes, this was the wrong direction. The right direction is to keep Prabhupada in the center. And I do believe if he was here now, he would be actively encouraging other people to initiate, because really that's the antithesis of just a few initiating, that is a few exclusive individuals, but rather many, many, many devotees, everyone who gives siksha, also giving diksha to the people they're teaching. That's a much more egalitarian view that will make our movement much stronger. I believe he would be behind us in that initiative.
Hmm.
Putting Prabhupada, because that keeps Prabhupada in the center for all time. All right, any other thoughts?
That segues into a question I had actually, and that was that there was at one time a feeling that if Srila Prabhupada had continued on this planet, that the movement may have done things a little differently from how he left it that was happening. And in our conversations with Krishna Maharaj, he indicated that there was a shift more towards the farming aspect of life and more liberal ways of doing things, strategies in terms of reaching out to people, because Srila Prabhupada really did want that all living entities have the opportunity everyone have the opportunity to become Krishna conscious. It shouldn't be like an egalitarian movement, that type of stuff. And so I know that you have the same mood, and we see that in your mood also. But what would your comment be in that regard? Did Srila Prabhupada have that from your point of view? Would you agree with that? Or would you say, no, what we're doing now as continuing the 60s and 70s and the 80s is really what Srila Prabhupada said, don't change anything. So this is what it is.
Very, very good point. If I had one wish to fulfill, I would have 1 hour with Srila Prabhupada to ask questions and record them for posterity, and that would be among them. Because what I've seen since his departure is that things that could be reconciled in 10 minutes drag on for 10 years or 20. Things that he could have reconciled. So yes, the experience I've had, Nityananda Prabhu, having joined ISKCON and been through those years from 72 to 77, I came in just at the end, I would say, of the first phase of ISKCON, which was a very small groups of devotees in various cities, pooling their efforts, attracting others, raising money through book sales primarily, and buying properties to use as temples. During those years, there was a great emphasis on, or during the early years rather, there was just an emphasis on adding Krishna to your life. Later, post 70, say 73 or so, things began to change. They shifted more to, if you're really a devotee, then you'll be a brahmachari, you'll be a sannyasi. They're really all that matters. Householders have, they are deviating from the mission, so they're kind of useless. And see, formally, if you were fixed up, you could become a householder, and being a householder was an emblem of advancement in Krishna consciousness. But then it's flipped on its head. And after 73 or so, to be a householder meant you were throwing in the towel for the preaching mission and just going off for your sense gratification. So the serious devotees would all be brahmacharis. I was with Tamal Krishna Maharaj in Chicago in 1975 when Srila Prabhupada came. And there's a famous picture. I think one of your members in Dallas has it on their wall in the living room. It's a large gathering with 5 or 6 Radha Damodar buses and vans and perhaps 100 or 200 young men. That powerful brahmachari party was distributing massive amounts of books all over the country. So at that time, Srila Prabhupada spoke with those young men and said that it's very good that you're brahmachari, stay brahmachari, and this is pretty much the value that was in the air through those years. I was looking through all those friends of mine in that picture. Nearly all of them got married. 1 or 2 remained as sannyasis or became sannyasis, and they had troubles. All except Giridhari Maharaj, practically all of them have gone off saffron in the ensuing years. So if you remember in 1977, Srila Prabhupada was ill. He was in Vrindavan, but he was saying that I've established 50% of my mission, book distribution. Now I have to establish the other 50%, Varnashram. And Abhiram Prabhu has confirmed to me that Prabhupada was feeling this way or saying these things because he was seeing that his brahmachari students were not able to maintain their position as brahmacharis. So he wanted to show them how they could live a Krishna conscious life as householders. That was his intent on going to Gita Nagari at that time. So Prabhupada was not, what is the word, dogmatic. He was attentive to the circumstances. He would adjust and adjust and adjust again, because no one had ever done what he was doing, and he was not stuck on one formula or another. When it was evident it was more lucrative and more successful if devotees distributed books in Western clothes, he gave his blessings. Yes, you do it. So many adjustments were there. And there's no doubt in my mind that Prabhupada would have made many more adjustments if he had more time with us. So there's a phrase, I believe, a word called ideation, where you take a moment in time and freeze it as the eternal, always existing way things should be. And I see that we have suffered from that ideation in North America for quite a few years now. And like you say, I do feel Tamal Krishna Maharaj would not be content with the status quo. He would find new ways and means to reach people more effectively. That was certainly Srila Prabhupada's mood, and that was his mood as well.
Yeah. In your preaching, just a follow-up question on that. In your preaching, because we reach out to so many different cultures, some cultures are more conservative and some cultures are less conservative, how do you deal with those cultures who say, no, but that's not how our acharyas did things?
Yes.
And look at all these acharyas over hundreds of years, maybe in thousands of years. How is it that we're going to be able to justify to those acharyas that it was okay for us to do this and practically probably destroy the movement because of our tendency to make and break things,
Yes, very good question. Yes, this is a crucial question right now before all of us who are wanting to continue Prabhupada's mission. Tamal Krishna Maharaj preached extensively in China, India, and in the West. And here's another little anecdote I remember. He said the difference between the Occident and the Orient, the West and the East, is that people in the East want to save face, and people in the West want to wear their heart on their sleeves. In other words, in the Asian cultures, there is much more of a sense of showing respect, of always maintaining etiquette and not showing what you may be feeling. You will definitely keep your feelings in the background to observe the etiquettes. In the West, there is a notion that if I tell everyone how I'm feeling, I'll feel better. You see? If I speak just straightforwardly, then I'm going to feel better. Even if whatever it does to the other person, I don't care. So Srila Prabhupada writes, there's a powerful purport in Chaitanya Charitamrita, where he says, and this is where Lord Chaitanya took sannyas in order to defeat the impersonalists, the logicians, the scholars who floated to the top of the ocean of love of Godhead in which everyone else was drowning. In that purport, Prabhupada writes that the Acharya makes adjustments according to time, place, and country. He said that he says that the way you would preach to someone in India is much different than the way you would preach to someone in Europe or America. And if we say that we have to do everything the same way, no matter where we are in the world, that is niyamagraha, that is trying to do the impossible. You remember that Prabhupada said specifically about Chaitanya Charitamrita publication that impossible is a word in a fool's dictionary. So important was this point that Prabhupada used that same word in that purport. If we want to do everything the same way we would do things in India, that is impossible for the West. And if we want to do things the way we do in the West, that is impossible for India. So the Acharya makes adjustments according to time, place, and country. So what has happened over the last couple of 20 years or so In the early days, ISKCON was very powerful in America, and it was like India was like Timbuktu. If you had to go to India, it was very austere. It was going to be front lines. You're going to be, struggling. All the nectar was in North America, and now ISKCON India has just exploded, and it's doing so well. And ISKCON North America has struggled. So there's a tendency for some devotees to think, well, if the devotees in North America would just do things the way we do in India, they'd be successful. In India, ISKCON is regarded because it is conservative. It is maintaining the culture, and that's what attracts people, and they very much appreciate the authenticity. In the West, on the other hand, if you just present the authentic Vedic practices, cultural practices, then it's a huge leap for people to abandon their culture to adopt another one. That can happen gradually over time, but if that's the requirement from day one, then you're not going to get many people. That's been our discovery at Krishna House. And we dialed it back to the early days, the friendly days, where we just want people to add Krishna to their lives and don't worry about any of the externals. That has been effective. So I do believe Tamal Krishna Maharaj would recognize this. I do believe Prabhupada also would adjust. If he saw that our temples were really only attracting large numbers of people from the Indian communities, he would want us to do something about that.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, anything else?
Kalakanta Prabhu, can I ask a question?
Please.
Since you have seen Vishnu Jan Swami also, can you talk something about Tamal Krishna Maharaj and Vishnu Jan Swami's relationship or their friendship?
Yes, it was a very interesting relationship. Vishnu Jan Swami was one of the most charismatic people I have ever met. He just had such a incredible artistic sense. Many of the melodies that we use in Kirtan today in ISKCON were melodies he created himself. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya. I mean, we just think they're ancient melodies. No, these were created by Vishnu Jan Swami, many of them. So he was charismatic. He was a tall, athletic man. He was very devoted to Srila Prabhupada. He would go and chant on the street for hours to the point where he would tape his fingers with duct tape to keep playing the mridanga to stop the bleeding. This was the legend of Vishnu Jan Swami. He was not as practical a person. He was very charismatic and would attract people easily. So Tamal Krishna Maharaj, by contrast, was a very pragmatic type of person. So they were a great team. Vishnu Jan Swami would do kirtan, he would give talks, people would be very attracted, and then Tamal Krishna Maharaj would work the crowd. He would go through the people who are watching, and he would talk to them and give them good arguments why they should jump on the Radha Damodar bus right then and there. And they would do it. So it's like Tamal Krishna Maharaj was a good kirtan leader. He was an excellent speaker. Vishnu Jan Swami was just the most charismatic singer and speaker I have ever seen. He wasn't a great scholar, actually, Vishnu Jan Swami. He was, but he was so, his speeches came from his heart and really moved and touched you. So that was my impression of him. I think that biography that Vyasaki Prabhu wrote about Radha Damodar tells about his life very nicely. And being a charismatic person as he was very attractive to people. So as a young man, he took sannyas, and this put him in a difficult position with so many people attracted to him. So he and Tamal Krishna Maharaj were great friends. They served together very seamlessly. It was a great loss when Vishnu Jan Swami left us and left this world. All right. Any other thoughts? Sarvabhauma Prabhu, did you have a comment?
Yeah. Sarvabhauma Prabhu, you like to unmute, please?
Yes, I just wanted to say that when Tamal Krishna was in, oh, sorry, when Tamal Krishna was in England, he once said we should really rack our brains because it's not the 1960s or 70s anymore. So he really was. I think when he went back to SMU, he kind of got the experience of American young people, and he started thinking very deeply about how we could preach in a more congenial way for this culture. And I really feel that Kalakanta's development of Krishna houses would be very much approved by Tamal Krishna Maharaj. And he wasn't innovative in China through yoga. He had some disciples that taught yoga in Hong Kong and in China. He had them use yoga as a way to get into the Chinese culture and spread the basics of Krishna conscious philosophy. So he was always very innovative. And even with the Radha Damodar party, when he combined incense sales with books and things like that, he was very practical, how to support the BBT and, distribute books in very conservative parts of America. So he was always very thoughtful. And even when he taught his disciples, like his disciple Kastuba commented that when he came to Dallas to associate with Tamal Krishna Maharaj, Tamal Krishna Maharaj was always trying to teach him how to think, how to, not just tell him what to do, but teach him how to think, create, appropriately and according to time, place, and circumstance. I just wanted to comment on that.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's very nice. I remember, I think it was Lakshmi Nrsimha was the treasurer for Radha Damodar. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj had told him, never remove your money belt. You are the treasurer, you're keeping this cash, never remove the money belt. Well, he would. So he went in the shower and he just took it off for a moment, went in the shower and came out and was gone. And he was aghast because it had just been the big weekend and there was a lot of cash there. And he looked everywhere and finally he had to drag himself into Tamal Krishna Maharaj and tell him what happened. And of course, Tamal Krishna Maharaj pulled it out of his drawer. I told you never. So yes, he was quite adept at getting us to think, to meet challenges. He told me once, I had to go to Dallas to fill in for him on a TV show, the American Religious Town Hall. They invited him to speak, meet with a rabbi and a priest and a couple of ministers, Protestant ministers. And because he couldn't make it, he invited me to do it. So I went and did my best. And then afterwards, he was so encouraging. He said, I couldn't have done better myself. I probably would have yucked it up a little more, but I couldn't have done better myself. He said, I guess all those years in presenting things to professors on the library party paid off. So he was good at challenging and getting us to think and also building our confidence. That's what I remember about him.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Actually, I'm sure a number of us saw that presentation that you did, that you're talking of, Kalakanta Prabhu. And we were very impressed with what you had said, because at the time when we were preaching, we were using these statements that all of you were making as encouraging us to speak in the same vein and actually with confidence, because you reach out with people. There's so many people who really challenge us and say things that, would otherwise sort of throw us off our focus, But hearing what you said at that time was really very good. Was very good, actually. Thank you.
His mercy. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else then?
Prabhu, Shy, we are here. Was there any time that Tamal Krishna Maharaj was heavy with you? Any particular instance?
um, I'm just looking to see if my wife is listening. All right, I'll tell you the story. When I went to Houston, I was newly married, and Tamal Krishna Maharaj was. You have to understand, at that time, it was still sort of a zonal acharya mood. Many of Prabhupada's disciples were adversely affected by it, and very skeptical about gurus in ISKCON. So my new wife, Jita Mitra, reluctantly went with me to Houston to run the temple. And I would say she and Tamal Krishna Maharaj had a sort of a cool relationship, remote. And after some time there, after a few years, we needed to get to a school situation that would be more compatible for our son at that time, which was available in Vancouver, and the devotees there were inviting us. So it was a good time to, excuse me, things were going well in the temple. It was a good time to make a move. So when I told Tamal Krishna Maharaj, he separately called my wife in to see him with the then regional secretary. And he told her, well, you can go to Vancouver, but Kalakanta has to stay here. And she said, no, I'm staying with my husband. Actually, they're both from New York, so you can imagine, you know. So nobody was giving much ground. So I think that he was a little heavier on her than he was ever heavy on me about this. And then later, the regional secretary told us both that after the meeting, Tamal Krishna Maharaj turned him and said, well, I really blew that one, didn't I? That was the metamorphosis I saw in him, from being a very strong person to being a very accommodating person, and respectful and intuitive. And that was a wonderful, just for me personally, in our relation. I think that's why I felt his departure so deeply, because I had seen that transformation and become part of that, of the many who appreciated him in that role. So I don't know if he and my wife ever spoke again. But we did end up moving to Vancouver, and Houston did much better even without us after we left.
Any sweet pastime, Prabhu, with Gurudev, with Tamal Krishna Maharaj?
I think I've exhausted my supply for the moment. The last exchanges we had in Mayapur were the sweetest, and I will always remember those.
One point, Bhakti, the wife of Brahma Tirtha Prabhu, there was a period in Houston earlier that before you came when Bhakti was sort of fed up with the over brahmachari mood, and she was packing up ready to leave Houston. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj realized what valuable devotee she was and her husband, and so he talked to her, and he decided to be very supportive of her. And she tells, Brahmatirtha tells the story that after the talk with Bhakti, Tamal Krishna Maharaj had some brahmacharis the next morning from Mangalore kind of escort her in and, make sure she had a glass of water to drink. And so he did, make that adjustment. And as the years went by, it turned more in that direction.
Yes, she tells that story beautifully. they escorted her in, gave her a chair, gave her water. After previously just kind of stay in the women's section, out of the way, don't bother us.
I just wanted to add that.
All right, so thank you very much, Prabhuji.
Oh, thank you very much. So valuable to have you on with us, hear this, and have this recorded for posterity. I mean, you know, that I can imagine many years from now when people look back at the early beginnings of the ISKCON movement, these conversations, these recollections are going to count for a lot in terms of building the confidence in people of the authenticity of Krishna consciousness and how necessary it is in every one of our lives, you know. So thank you so very much for that.
Thank you very much.
Very
All
helpful.
glories to Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Tamal Krishna Maharaj.
All glories to Prabhuji. All glories to Jai.
Evil.
Hare Krishna. So Shreya Prabhu, gonna have you let me know what we should do now.
Since we didn't get Maharaj, I think we'll just stop now.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining this call. Yeah, Shreya Prabhu, sorry, you were going to say something.
Oh, sorry, yeah, but the next program will be on the 23rd,
Yes,
morning 9 a.m. with Radha Damodar reunion.
that'll be a rather down the traveling Sankirtan party reunion. Yes, thank you very much. And thank you, everybody, for attending today's program. Vanchakalpa, Durvishcha, Kripasindhubhya Evacha, Patitanam Pavanebhyo, Vaishnavebhyo, Namo Namaha. We look forward to seeing you all at the next program on the 23rd, Sunday the 23rd, which is next week actually, at 9 o'clock, same time we started today.
Oh, Prabhu, it's a Saturday.
It's a Saturday, I'm sorry, 23rd is a Saturday, I'm thinking 24th. 23rd is a Saturday, you're right, it's on a Saturday, 9 o'clock in the morning.
The morning, yes.
Yeah. Thank you again. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Haribo.
Hare Krishna. Damayan Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Thank you,
I'm
Prabhu.
ending the call.
Hare Krishna.
Hare